It's time to buy a countertop hydroponic system. And in this program, I'm going to give you a 12-point buyer's guide. I'm not going to tell you which one to buy because there's lots of variations on the market and they change all the time. Instead, what I want to do is give you a 12-point checklist. This will be a list that you can go down when you're shopping for these, compare the one you're looking at to the list, and see how good it is. The more check marks you get on the list, the better the product. Now, I have two systems here that I've been testing, and I'm going to use those as examples. This one here is the Let Pot, and I just got it, so I haven't been able to use it yet, but I will be doing a review video on it very shortly. This one over here is a no-name product that I've had for a while, and I got it off Temu. You can see it's working. I got a tomato plant here, and I have a lettuce plant here. Lettuce tastes pretty good. Now let's look at the 12-point checklist. When we compare these hydroponic systems, there are really four things that are important to the plants. One is the seeds, the nutrients, the fertilizer that's being used, the holder, the thing that's going to keep the plant upright, and then we have the light. And one of the nice things about these countertop systems is that the light is built into the hydroponic system. That makes it really easy for homeowners to grow their own vegetables right in the kitchen. All these systems use the same seeds. There's no special hydroponic seeds, although there's some companies that want you to believe their seeds are better. They're really not. You can use anybody's seed. As far as the holders go, we're going to have a look at this in more detail. They're all pretty much the same. When it comes to fertilizer, everybody's using the same fertilizer. You probably see these bottles, this A and B mixture. Look, the bottom line is plants use the same nutrients, so everyone's going to supply the same amount of nutrients. That leaves us with the light. The light is the most important thing about these systems. Now, sure, you might care about the aesthetics and so on, and I'm not going to get into aesthetics. That's for you to figure out. I'm interested in growing good plants. When it comes to growing good plants and you're comparing two systems, it all comes down to the light. You get the best light, you will grow the fastest food, and it will be tasty. So let's focus in on the light. Now, what I find really amazing is that none of these manufacturers tell you what the light is. It's the most important part of their system, but they don't tell you a lot about it because they think you don't know anything about LED lights. And in some cases, that's quite true. So some manufacturers tell you absolutely nothing. A few manufacturers will tell you the wattage. They'll say, oh, our light is a 50-watt light. Well, that tells you nothing. Now, in the olden days when we had fluorescent lights, that actually meant something because all the fluorescent lights were pretty much the same. And a 50-watt light was better than a 30-watt light. When we come to LEDs, that's no longer true. The wattage is the amount of electricity that the light uses, not the efficiency of the light, and it doesn't tell you how much light comes out. You could actually have two units here. This might be 50 watts, and this might be 70 watts. The 50 watt might produce better light and more of it. Wattage tells you nothing about how good the light is coming out of these. Now, if we go and look for some LED grow lights, what do we find? Well, all kinds of information about the chips that are used, about the efficiency of the chips. You'll see the spectra to see what kind of light you get, and that's really important. You also see things like the PPFD values. Now, I've made several videos on LED lights, and I actually have a buyer's guide for them. And the PPFD map is critical in buying it. That tells you how much light you have in various parts of the surface. We're told nothing. You have to guess at that. I took both of these systems and turned them up to maximum light. And I measured the light at 7 inches from the light. This unit over here, the no-name brand, gave me 9,000 lux. This one over here gave me 15,000 lux. That's like 70% more light. More light means better growth. So that value is important. Now, I also took a reading in my plant room. Now there I use real grow lights, but I've got them turned down pretty low and they're a long way from the plants because I'm growing Streptocarpus and they're a low light plant. So at the leaf surface of those Streptocarpus, they're getting about 12,000 lux. So about the same as this unit at 7 inches from the light. What does that tell me? Well, it tells me that the light from these units is pretty low. Vegetables like high light. My Streptocarpus only need low light to grow. So these lights are barely bright enough to grow vegetables. Now they will grow vegetables. You can see that this light over here, which has a lower output than this light, does grow vegetables. But if we have a low light, they're going to grow slowly. The problem we have here is that the manufacturers aren't telling you the information you need. So it's really hard to select the right light. My point 2 is also about light. It's about the bloom mode and the veg mode. Now, when we go back in history and we talk about growing things, we sort of had two options. We had high pressure sodium, which was very red. There wasn't enough blue light in there. And we had metal halides, which were very blue, and they didn't have enough red light. So what growers did was they mixed these lights to try and get a better ratio of blue and red. And that developed this idea that you need more red light to bloom things. The same thing happened with fluorescent lights. I grew things with fluorescent lights 50 years ago. And everybody said, okay, that's a white light. And if you want to bloom things, put an incandescent light in there because that adds more red. And that will get things to bloom. Now, back then, with that old-fashioned technology, that was important. That's no longer important. These are LED lights. LED lights can produce the spectra we need. This idea of a bloom light and a veg light is nonsense. That's a selling feature that these manufacturers are using to tell you their product's better. But it's nonsense. So I had to look at these LEDs and put them in various modes. This unit here in veg mode has both red and blue on. But if I switch over to bloom mode, it turns the blue off. Now that does increase the ratio of red to blue, but because we turn the blue off, we're actually getting less light. And since these units already produce a lower level of light than we need, I would never do that. With a unit like this, I'm going to run it in veg all the time because that gives me the maximum amount of light, and that will grow better vegetables. Now this no-name product, I tested it too, and I found something really interesting. In seedling mode, it has both blue and red, but in veg mode, it turns the blue off, which is the opposite of what you're supposed to do. This no-name light here is actually giving you the wrong light when you set it up above. When you set veg mode, you should be getting the blue LEDs coming on, and it doesn't do that. Veg mode, blue mode, great selling feature that a lot of people believe, absolutely useless. Forget about it. That's not a feature of these lights. You want to set the lights to get the highest amount of light you can, whatever the setting is called. How about reagents and seeds? As I've said, most of the systems use the same fertilizer, so they're all pretty much the same. The difference is that some units give you the fertilizer, like this one here, like the lead pot. Others, like this cheap unit here, they don't give you any fertilizer. They also don't give you any seeds, whereas this one over here does give you seeds. When you're buying a system, you should get seeds and you should get some fertilizer, or you should be paying $20 less for the unit. So if these are identical and this gives you seeds and fertilizer and this doesn't, this better be $20 cheaper to be the same quality as this one. Otherwise, you're going to have to go out and buy this, and this is about $10, and buying some seeds is about $10. You got to factor that in the cost. Now, it's not important that the unit supplies these. You just have to figure out that you're going to have to order these separately. And in fact, what happened to me was I got this unit here and I went to set it up and I couldn't do anything. No fertilizer, no seeds. So I had to go out and buy some. If this is your first unit, you really want it included. It just makes it so much easier. Most of these hydroponic systems have a little pump inside. And what most of them do is they'll turn the pump on for a few minutes to keep the water mixed, to keep fresh nutrients around the roots, and then the pump turns off. So most of the time the plants are sitting just in the water without the pump on, and that's fine. But as the plants grow, they use up the oxygen. They work better if you move the water around a little bit. So it is a good idea to have a pump. Pretty much all the units I looked at did have a pump. If you're looking at a unit that's lower cost and doesn't have a pump, it probably won't grow the vegetables as well. You do want a pump to mix that solution up for you. We're on point number 5 now, and that's the number of holes that you have. Now, if you look at this unit here, you get a tremendous number of holes. And if you look at the pictures online of them growing things, you'll see that these are just full of vegetables. All the manufacturers do that, so that's not unique to this manufacturer. They all do that. Those pictures are faked. There is no way you can grow vegetables this close together. This number of holes makes no sense whatsoever. But when you're shopping online, these manufacturers make a big deal about how many plants can they grow at one time. The reality is that these are small units. You can see over here I've got 1 lettuce plant, I've got 1 basil plant, and 1 tomato plant. That pretty much fills the unit. It says a dozen holes, but I can only use 3 of them. Now over on the end here, I've stuck in a little streptocarpus leaf to see if it will root. But when these plants get larger, you just can't plant many together. So ignore the number of holes it has. Whatever the number, it's too many. In fact, they're a negative feature because wherever you have a hole that you don't use, you have to cover it. Otherwise, the light gets into the water and grows algae, and we don't want that. That makes the water inside really yucky for the plant. Over here, you might notice that I've covered up all the unused holes with masking tape, which is a real pain. This manufacturer, they actually give you nice little lids. That solves that problem. But there aren't enough of those to cover most of the holes. So for most of these countertop units, they have far too many holes. Don't look at that as a feature. All of these units use something called sponges. I'm not sure why they're called that, because they're not actually made out of sponge material. If we have a look at one of these, you have some sort of a holder, and then inside we have something called the sponge. Now it turns out most of these are made either from compressed peat moss or compressed core. So they are an organic material. But these are the sponges. There's a little hole in the top. You put your seed in there. You put it in a holder. You set it in the unit. Water flows up, makes the seed wet. The seed germinates, and away you go. It's a pretty simple system. One of the keys to understand is that these are disposable items. Each time you start a new seed, you want to use a new one of these. So it is important that the unit you use has these that you can buy commercially online. You want to buy no-name products here. You don't want to go back to the manufacturer and buy their expensive version. You want to buy a cheap version on Amazon. And they come in different shapes. So this one over here is quite a bit larger and is more square shaped. This is a much smaller one and it's round. So what you want to do is find out which shape the manufacturer is using and then go and pretend you're buying another set of these because you will need them eventually. Don't go out and buy them yet. Just make sure that that size and shape is available. If it is, that's a plus for that unit. You don't want to get stuck with an odd shape that you can't use. Now, my guess is that most of these are mostly interchangeable. Now, when I take the large one from here and try to put it in this small cup, it doesn't really fit well. It's too high. But these smaller ones would fit in this one because they're smaller. Make sure that you can buy these as a third-party accessory and that they're very commonly available. That means that they're easy to get and it will keep the price of these down. These holders, they're called pods, or maybe the pod is this part, I don't really know, but they go together. The problem with these is that when light comes down to the top of these, algae and mold grows. And you can see that very clearly here. These sponges stick up above the holders. so they're exposed to the light and they're growing stuff all over them. The other option is to get a sponge that's a little shorter, like this one. It's about an inch below the top. And then what they do is they cover it with a little paper cover. It's a little finicky to put on. And at first I thought, well, this is kind of a silly idea. But it's there to keep the light from going onto the sponge, which means the sponge stays cleaner, you get less algae, and you get less mold. So it actually makes a lot of sense. The seed will come up through the hole because it's going to head towards the light. So ideally, you want these pods to be designed so that the sponge is below the surface, and it's nice to have some cover. Now, let's be honest, this is just a piece of paper, and you're going to run out of these pretty quickly, and then you're going to have to use some tape to cover it. But it is nice to have to start off with. How about the size of these units? How big do you want the unit? Well, to be honest with you, I find all of these really puny. Now, this one's a little smaller than this one, but not by much. And remember I said, you're not going to use most of the holes. If you grow a tomato in here, a tomato needs a space about this big. A lettuce can take a little less space, but as it gets big, it needs more space too. So every plant is about this big. So a unit like this, it's going to grow 3 large plants. That's it. Maybe 4 if you really squeeze them in. The bigger the units, the better they are because you're going to be able to grow more in them. In this case, size really does matter. Now, when I say size, it's not really the base unit that's important. It's the size of the light that's important. And the reason is that most of the light is in the center here. As we move towards the outside, you get less and less light. And it has to do with the fact that the light is overlapping in the center, but not around the edges. So what I really want is a unit that's this big, but a light that is bigger. This would be a great unit if the light came out to here. And particularly if it had side shields to direct the light back into the center. But nobody makes them like that. They're pretty much all made where this size is the same as the base size. So what that means is, the bigger the base, the better the buy. Because if these things really work for you and you want to grow things in them, you're going to run out of room here. Buy a big unit. All right, so we've been growing these for a while and we've been harvesting some lettuce and it's going great. Now we want to start some new plants. Well, one of the things that's important is that you take these apart and clean them. Because no matter how hard you try, you're going to have some gunk in the bottom, some algae growing, some old fertilizer, and so on. Bits of roots are dropping in there. You want to clean them really well. It's really hard to empty these and clean them if the light is not detachable. For this unit over here, I simply push this lever and I can take the light away. And now I can clean the unit. I think that's really important. Putting it back is just as easy. You got to get it in the right slot though. You don't want the light attached when you're trying to clean these units. This unit over here, I can't figure out how to get the light off, which means washing this and cleaning this is going to be a real pain. Now, I've asked the manufacturer to see if there's a way to do this, and the manual shows that there is. You press here and it comes off, but it doesn't seem to work. So whatever unit you're buying, make sure that you can take the lamp off the unit so you can wash it. When you look at these surfaces, you have a number of different holes. You obviously have the larger holes, that's where the plants go, and you need some of those. But then there's all these little holes. This manufacturer actually gives you some plastic straws that you can put in here to kind of hold up your plants, and maybe that makes some sense, I'm not so sure. A lot of manufacturers will put holes in here so you can put in little name tags. They give you these useless name tags that you'd never use. Surely you know what a tomato looks like. Maybe not the first time you ever grew tomatoes, but after that, you don't have to label it. And the problem with all these little holes, they let light in and you grow algae. Personally, I'd rather have one solid piece without all these little holes. I don't need them. But most manufacturers give you the holes, so you may not be able to find a unit without them. How about a phone app? Now, all these units have some sort of control system. On this unit, it's in the front here, and it's a nice display. On this unit, it's at the top. The display's kind of dinky, but it's functional. And in fact, I kind of like it up here because then I know no water is going to go into the unit. But either one works, and I can control both lights without an app. Why would you want an app to control these things? It makes no sense to me. But some of the more deluxe units like this one comes with an app. This cheaper unit does not. So do you need an app? Well, I thought, no, you don't. This is a dumb idea. But there is a reason for the app. With this unit here, I can configure everything. So I set how long I want the light on, I set the light level, and so on. But if the power goes out, so we have a power outage, it loses all its memory. Now I got to start all over again. This unit here, same thing. For some reason, the manufacturers of these units never thought to build in some memory. This manufacturer solves that problem with the app. So if you have your app attached to it, the app remembers your settings. So when the power comes back on, you turn on your app, all the settings are there, and it automatically downloads it and the unit's up and running. This unit over here, you have a power failure. There's no app. You got to reprogram it. And if you reprogrammed it 3 months ago, are you going to remember which buttons to press? It's not that obvious. You kind of have to learn the button. For that reason, an app is not a bad idea. But I really wish manufacturers would build in the memory so you don't need an app. I think that's the better option, but I haven't found a unit yet that meets that requirement. So maybe the app is the second best option. Okay, that's 11 points that I've just given you. We're down to number 12. And this is additional automation. And you have to decide whether that's actually a feature or not. I mean, personally, I like things simple. I don't like a lot of extra automation. This unit here, pretty basic. Turn it on, the pump goes, the lights go, you can set the timer, and you're done. That's about it. Every once in a while, I have to come along and pour in some more fertilizer solution, and I have to go and manually make that up. Really not a big deal. This unit here is more automated. So the one thing it does is that when the level gets too low and you've got it set in automation, it actually pumps in more water to keep the level high. Now, how quickly does this level go down? Well, this guy's been running for over 2 weeks and I still haven't topped it up. So this is something you're going to have to do maybe every 2 weeks. As these plants get larger, they're going to use more water, so maybe you have to do it once a week. But that's not a big job as far as I'm concerned. I want to see my plants more often than that anyway. But this unit will self-fill, so if I've gone to Europe for 2 months, it keeps growing. Of course, nobody's harvesting the vegetables, so I'm not sure how useful that is. The other thing this unit does, which is kind of unique, it has a reservoir at the back here that holds extra fertilizer solution. So when it adds water, it also adds the fertilizer. It tries to maintain the right nutrient level for the plants. Again, without this automation, you simply do it manually. You pour some more in that you've mixed up. With automation, it can take care of that for you. And of course, there's a price to that. You have to buy the automation, so this unit costs more. And of course, when it breaks down, this unit is more of a pain in the ass. So you have to decide if the extra automation is a plus or a minus, and only you can decide that. That's my 12-point buyer's guide. When you're looking at a unit and trying to decide which one to buy, go down the list of the 12 points. Put a little check mark beside the unit to tell you that it meets the criteria you want. And then buy the one that has the most check marks. It's as easy as that. Bottom line is, all of these units will grow vegetables, particularly lettuce, because that's a lower light requirement. Most of them will also grow tomatoes, but the better units will grow larger plants and grow more tomatoes more quickly. And after all, I think that's what you're really after here. You want to grow these things fairly quickly, because to be honest, the surface here is quite small. If I had to live off the vegetables this thing produces, I would have starved a long time ago. It's a nice addition to my meals, but I'm not going to get a lot of stuff out of this. Get the biggest unit you can with the best light system. I plan to make a whole series of hydroponic videos, and I will be reviewing both of these units and some others. That will give you a more in-depth look at these particular products. I will also be producing some more generic videos, and as those are produced, I will put links here or here. Have some fresh lettuce right in the kitchen on me. Happy gardening.